on some day soon, my fellow Americans. Thank you, Mr. President, and I yield the floor. I note the absence of a quorum.
Clerk, call the roll.
Mr. Akaka.
Good morning. Every day, all across the world, American diplomats and civilians work tirelessly to advance the interests and values of our nation. Often, they are away from their families. Sometimes they brave great danger. Yesterday, 4 of these extraordinary Americans were killed in an attack on our diplomatic post in Benghazi. Among those killed was our ambassador, Chris Stevens, as well as Foreign Service Officer Sean Smith. We are still notifying the families of the others who were killed. And today, the American people stand united in holding the families of the 4 Americans in our thoughts and in our prayers. The United States condemns in the strongest terms this outrageous and shocking attack. We're working with the government of Libya to secure our diplomats. I've also directed my administration to increase our security at diplomatic posts around the world. And make no mistake, we will work with the Libyan government to bring to justice the killers who attacked our people. Since our founding, the United States has been a nation that respects all faiths. We reject all efforts to denigrate the religious beliefs of others. But there is absolutely no justification to this type of senseless violence. None. The world must stand together to unequivocally reject these brutal acts. Already, many Libyans have joined us in doing so, and this attack will not break the bonds between the United States and Libya. Libyan security personnel fought back against the attackers alongside Americans. Libyans helped some of our diplomats find safety, and they carried Ambassador Stevens' body to the hospital, where we tragically learned that he had died. It's especially tragic that Chris Stevens died in Benghazi because it is a city that he helped to save. At the height of the Libyan revolution, Chris led our diplomatic post in Benghazi. With characteristic skill, courage, and resolve, he built partnerships with Libyan revolutionaries and helped them as they planned to build a new Libya. When the Gaddafi regime came to an end, Chris was there to serve as our ambassador to the new Libya, and he worked tirelessly to support this young democracy, and I think both Secretary Clinton and I relied deeply on his knowledge of the situation on the ground there. He was a role model to all who worked with him and to the young diplomats who aspire to walk in his footsteps. Along with his colleagues, Chris died in a country that is still striving to emerge from the recent experience of war. Today, the loss of these 4 Americans is fresh, but our memories of them linger on. I have no doubt that their legacy will live on through the work that they did far from our shores and in the hearts of those who love them back home. Of course, yesterday was already a painful day for our nation as we marked the solemn memory of the 9/11 attacks. We mourned with the families who were lost on that day. I visited the graves of troops who made the ultimate sacrifice in Iraq and Afghanistan at the hallowed grounds of Arlington Cemetery and had the opportunity to say thank you and visit some of our wounded warriors at Walter Reed. And then last night we learned the news of this attack in Benghazi. As Americans, let us never, ever forget that our freedom is only sustained because there are people who are willing to fight for it, to stand up for it, and in some cases lay down their lives for it. Our country is only as strong as the character of our people and the service of those, both civilian and military, who represent us around the globe. No acts of terror will ever shake the resolve of this great nation, alter that character, or eclipse the light of the values that we stand for. Today we mourn for more Americans who represent the very best of the United States of America. We will not waver in our commitment to see that justice is done for this terrible act, and make no mistake, justice will be done. But we also know that the lives these Americans led stand in stark contrast to those of their attackers. These 4 Americans stood up for freedom and human dignity. They should give every American great pride in the country that they served. and the hope that our flag represents to people around the globe who also yearn to live in freedom and with dignity. We grieve with their families, but let us carry on their memory and let us continue their work of seeking a stronger America and a better world for all of our children. Thank you. May God bless the memory of those we lost, and may God bless the United States of America.
Mr. President, was this an act of war?
His relationship with Libya moving forward?
Good morning. Americans woke up this morning with tragic news and felt heavy hearts as they considered that individuals who have served in our diplomatic corps were brutally murdered across the world. This attack on American individuals and embassies is outrageous. It's disgusting. It breaks the hearts of all of us who think of these people who have served during their lives the cause of freedom and justice and honor. We mourn their loss and join together in prayer that the Spirit of the Almighty might comfort the families of those who have been so brutally slain. 4 diplomats lost their life, including the U.S. Ambassador, J. Christopher Stevens, in the attack on our embassy at Benghazi, Libya. And of course, with these words, I extend my condolences to the grieving loved ones who have left behind as a result of these who have lost their lives in the service of our nation. And I know that the people across America are grateful for their service, and we mourn their sacrifice. America will not tolerate attacks against our citizens and against our embassies. We'll defend also our constitutional rights of speech and assembly and religion. We have confidence in our cause in America. We respect our Constitution. We stand for the principles our Constitution protects. We encourage other nations to understand and respect the principles of our Constitution, because we recognize that these principles are the ultimate source of freedom for individuals around the world. I also believe the administration was wrong to stand by a statement sympathizing with those who had breached our embassy in Egypt, instead of condemning their actions. It's never too early for the United States government to condemn attacks on Americans and to defend our values. The White House distanced itself last night from the statement, saying it wasn't cleared by Washington, and that reflects the mixed signals they're sending to the world. The attacks in Libya and Egypt underscore that the world remains a dangerous place and that American leadership is still sorely needed. In the face of this violence, America cannot shrink from the responsibility to lead. American leadership is necessary to ensure that events in the region don't spin out of control. We cannot hesitate to use our influence in the region to support those who share our values and our interests. Over the last several years, we've stood witness to an Arab Spring that presents an opportunity for a more peaceful and prosperous region, but it also poses the potential for peril if the forces of extremism and violence are allowed to control the course of events. We must strive to ensure that the Arab Spring does not become an Arab winter. With that, I'm happy to take any questions you may have. Steve?
The statement you referred to was a very toughly worded statement last night. Do you regret the tone at all, given what we know now?
The embassy in Cairo put out a statement after their grounds had been breached. Protesters were inside the grounds. They reiterated that statement after the breach. I think it's a terrible course for America to stand in apology for our values. That instead, when our grounds are being attacked and being breached, that the first response of the United States must be outrage at the breach of the sovereignty of our nation. And apology for America's values is never the right course.
Governor Romney, do you think, though, coming so soon after the events really had unfolded overnight was appropriate to be weighing in on this as this crisis is unfolding in real time?
The White House also issued a statement saying it tried to distance itself from those comments and said they were not reflecting of their views. I had the exact same reaction. These views were inappropriate. They were the wrong course to take. When our embassy has been breached by protesters, the first response should not be to say, yes, we stand by our comments that suggest that there's something wrong with the right of free speech.
What did the White House do wrong then, Governor Romney, if they put out a statement saying they disagreed with it?
Their administration spoke. The President takes responsibility not just for the words that come from his mouth, but also from the words that come from his ambassadors, from his administration, from his embassies, from his State Department. They clearly sent mixed messages to the world, and the statement that came from the administration, and the embassy is the administration. The statement that came from the administration was a statement which is akin to apology, and I think was a severe miscalculation.
Governor, when you talk about mixed signals, the world is watching. Isn't this itself a mixed signal when you criticize the administration at a time that Americans are being killed? Shouldn't politics stop for this?
We have a campaign for presidency of the United States and are speaking about the different courses we would each take with regards to the challenges that the world faces. The President and I, for instance, have differences of opinion with regards to Israel and our policies there, with regards to Iran, with regards to Afghanistan, with regards to Syria. We have many places of distinction and differences. We join together in the condemnation of the attacks on American embassies and the loss of American life, and join in the sympathy for these people. But it's also important for me, just as it was for the White House last night, by the way, to say that the statements were inappropriate. And in my view, a disgraceful statement on the part of our administration to apologize for American values.
Governor, some people have said that you jumped the gun a little in putting that statement out last night and that you should have waited until more details were available. Do you regret having that statement come out so early before we learned about all of the things that were happening?
I don't think we ever hesitate when we see something which is a violation of our principles. We express immediately when we feel that the President and his administration have done something which is inconsistent with the principles of America. Simply put, having an embassy which has been breached and has protesters on its grounds, having violated the sovereignty of the United States, having that embassy reiterate a statement effectively apologizing for the right of free speech is not the right course for an administration.
If you had known last night that the ambassador had died, and obviously I'm gathering you did not know.
Well, that came later.
That's right. If you had known that the ambassador had died, would you
I'm not going to take hypotheticals about what would have been known one and so forth. We responded last night to the events that happened in Egypt.
Governor Romney, one of your professed reasons for running is your economic know-how and your private sector experience. But now that foreign policy and the situation in the Middle East has been thrust into the presidential campaign, can you talk about why specifically you think you're better qualified than President Obama to handle these issues?
I think President Obama has demonstrated a lack of clarity as to a foreign policy. My foreign policy has three fundamental branches. First, confidence in our cause. a recognition that the principles America was based upon are not something we shrink from or apologize for, that we stand for those principles. The second is clarity in our purpose, which is that when we have a foreign policy objective, we describe it honestly and clearly to the American people, to Congress, and to the people of the world. And number three is resolve in our might, that in those rare circumstances where we decide it's essential for us to apply military might, that we do so with overwhelming force, that we do so in the clarity of a mission, understanding the nature of the U.S. Interest involved, understanding when the mission would be complete, what will be left when it is, what will be left behind us when that mission has been terminated. These elements, I believe, are essential to our foreign policy, and I haven't seen them from the President. As I've watched over the past 3.5 years, the President has had some successes. He's had some failures. It's a hit or miss approach, but it has not been based upon sound foreign policy.
How specifically, Governor Romney, would President Romney have handled this situation differently than President Obama did? You spoke out before midnight when all the facts weren't known. How would you have handled this differently than the President did?
I spoke out when the key fact that I referred to was known, which was that the Embassy of the United States issued what appeared to be an apology for American principles. That was a mistake. And I believe that when a mistake is made of that significance, you speak out.
And so how would you have handled it?
Governor Romney.
Yesterday, our U.S. diplomatic post in Benghazi, Libya, was attacked. Heavily armed militants assaulted the compound and set fire to our buildings. American and Libyan security personnel battled the attackers together. 4 Americans were killed. They included Sean Smith, a Foreign Service Information Management Officer, and our ambassador to Libya, Chris Stevens. We are still making next of kin notifications for the other 2 individuals. This is an attack that should shock the conscience of people of all faiths around the world. We condemn in the strongest terms this senseless act of violence, and we send our prayers to the families, friends, and colleagues of those we've lost. All over the world, every day, America's diplomats and development experts risk their lives in the service of our country and our values because they believe that the United States must be a force for peace and progress in the world, that these aspirations are worth striving and sacrificing for. Alongside our men and women in uniform, they represent the best traditions of a bold and generous nation. In the lobby of this building, the State Department, the names of those who have fallen in the line of duty are inscribed in marble. Our hearts break over each one, and now, because of this tragedy, we have new heroes to honor and more friends to mourn. Chris Stevens fell in love with the Middle East as a young Peace Corps volunteer teaching English in Morocco. He joined the Foreign Service, learned languages, won friends for America in distant places, and made other people's hopes his own. In the early days of the Libyan revolution, I asked Chris to be our envoy to the rebel opposition. He arrived on a cargo ship in the port of Benghazi and began building our relationships with Libya's revolutionaries. He risked his life to stop a tyrant, then gave his life trying to help build a better Libya. The world needs more Chris Stevenses. I spoke with his sister Ann this morning and told her that he will be remembered as a hero by many nations. Sean Smith was an Air Force veteran. He spent 10 years as an information management officer in the State Department. He was posted at The Hague and was in Libya on a brief temporary assignment. He was a husband to his wife Heather, with whom I spoke this morning. He was a father to 2 young children, Samantha and Nathan. They will grow up being proud of the service their father gave to our country, service that took him from Pretoria to Baghdad and finally to Benghazi. The mission that drew Chris and Sean and their colleagues to Libya is both noble and necessary. And we and the people of Libya honor their memory by carrying it forward. This is not easy. Today, many Americans are asking, indeed, I asked myself, how could this happen? How could this happen in a country we helped liberate, in a city we helped save from destruction? This question reflects just how complicated and at times how confounding the world can be. But we must be clear-eyed even in our grief. This was an attack by a small and savage group, not the people or government of Libya. Everywhere Chris and his team went in Libya, in a country scarred by war and tyranny, they were hailed as friends and partners. And when the attack came yesterday, Libyans stood and fought to defend our post. Some were wounded. Libyans carried Chris's body to the hospital, and they helped rescue and lead other Americans to safety. And last night, when I spoke with the president of Libya, he strongly condemned the violence and pledged every effort to protect our people and pursue those responsible. The friendship between our countries, born out of shared struggle, will not be another casualty of this attack. A free and stable Libya is still in America's interest and security, and we will not turn our back on that. Nor will we rest until those responsible for these attacks are found and brought to justice. We are working closely with the Libyan authorities to move swiftly and surely. We are also working with partners around the world to safeguard other American embassies, consulates, and citizens. There will be more time later to reflect, but today we have work to do. There is no higher priority than protecting our men and women wherever they serve. We are working to determine the precise motivations and methods of those who carried out this assault. Some have sought to justify this vicious behavior along with the protest that took place at our embassy in Cairo yesterday as a response to inflammatory material posted on the Internet. America's commitment to religious tolerance goes back to the very beginning of our nation. But let me be clear, there is no justification for this. None. Violence like this is no way to honor religion or faith. And as long as there are those who would take innocent life in the name of God, the world will never know a true and lasting peace. It is especially difficult that this happened on September 11th. It's an anniversary that means a great deal to all Americans. Every year on that day, we are reminded that our work is not yet finished, that the job of putting an end to violent extremism and building a safe and stable world continues. But September 11th means even more than that. It is a day on which we remember thousands of American heroes, the bonds that connect all Americans wherever we are on this earth, and the values that see us through every storm. And now it is a day on which we will remember Sean, Chris, and their colleagues. May God bless them, and may God bless the thousands of Americans working in every corner of the world who make this country the greatest force for peace, prosperity, and progress, and a force that has always stood for human dignity, the greatest force the world has ever known. And may God continue to bless the United States of America. Thank you.
Learned late last night, and really saddened to learn of the deaths of Ambassador Chris Stevens and 3 other American personnel in an attack on the U.S. consulate in Libya. I would be happy to talk by name about them, but their names have not been released at this stage. It doesn't take away from how important the jobs are of these Foreign Service officers. I join President Obama in condemning these senseless acts of violence. My thoughts are with the families of those who were killed in this horrible attack. It's too often forgotten that American diplomats risk their lives on a daily basis. Madam President, when I have had the good fortune since my days on the Foreign Affairs Committee in the House to travel the world, I always make sure wherever I go, I visit with Foreign Service personnel. They're every place. There's no group of people, I tell them that every time I have the opportunity to visit with them. No one does our country more in a positive sense than these Foreign Service officers. They work so hard, and their duty stations most of the time are very, very difficult. You take, for example, this good man, Ambassador Stevens, who we just confirmed a few months ago. He was a Peace Corps volunteer in Morocco. He taught English there. He's fluent in Arabic and French and English. He has served in Foreign Service in Jerusalem and Cairo, Saudi Arabia, Iran, been the staff assistant at the Bureau of Near Eastern Affairs. He had an education that was really unbelievably strong and powerful. He graduated from Berkeley. He had a law degree from Hastings, one of the premier law schools in the country. He has a master's degree from National War College. What a loss to our country. Our diplomatic corps is filled with admirable and dedicated public servants. And the 4 Americans who lost their lives yesterday exemplify the courage and sacrifice that happens every day at diplomatic posts around the globe. They learn the language, they live with the people where they go. As I've indicated, I've traveled to many of the American embassies abroad. I've always been so impressed and grateful for the leadership, and I communicate that to them every chance I get. We're so fortunate to have had for the last 3.5 years Hillary Clinton leading the State Department. I've indicated Ambassador Stevens was not a political appointment. He was appointee. He was a Foreign Service officer. As I indicated, served in the Peace Corps, spent his life giving of his time and his talents to promote democracy and American values around the world. I support President Obama's directive to increase security at our diplomatic posts around the world and to provide whatever resources necessary to keep our personnel in Libya safe. And I'll continue to monitor the situation as we learn more about these terrible events.
We learned yesterday and are receiving reports this morning of the attacks against the United States Embassy in Cairo and the U.S. Consulate in Benghazi in Libya. In Benghazi, our Ambassador Chris Stevens and 3 other Americans were killed in the service of our nation. Our thoughts and sympathies today are with the families of these brave Americans. These attacks remind us of the sacrifices made on a daily basis by Foreign Service officers, diplomatic security personnel, and our Marine security guards. I join my colleagues in strongly condemning the murder of these innocent Americans, and I support employing every available tool at our disposal to ensure the safety of Americans overseas and to hunt down those responsible for these attacks. Yesterday, we commemorated the anniversary of the attacks of September the 11th, and today we are reminded that brave Americans serve us every day at the risk of their own lives. We honor the Americans we lost in Libya, and we will stand united in our response. Among the things we can agree on in Washington is that the attacks on the U.S. and its representatives will be met with resolve, and that America's presence and defense of our national interests across the globe will not be deterred by the acts of violent extremists. I yield the floor.
When I woke up this morning, I woke up to just terrible news, to learn that our ambassador in Libya had been killed by a mob. And so we've lost Ambassador Chris Stevens. We lost 3 others at the American embassy in Libya. And it is a terrible tragedy. And at the same time yesterday, our embassy in Cairo was stormed, but thanks to the vigilance of its leadership and our wonderful Marine Corps, they are defending the embassy. We lost no one in Cairo. But, Madam President, I first of all want to expand to all of the families who lost someone in Libya overnight my extreme and definite condolences and sympathy. I'm a little bit at a loss for words because these tragedies that happen to our men and women who serve at our embassy happen all too frequently, and then we say a grateful nation never forgets, and then we go on to bash our federal employees and our State Department people, saying, oh, they have these cushy jobs in exotic places and they must be out eating brie somewhere. Well, you know, I lost at the Kobar bombings diplomats. Ambassador Bartley, who was the head of our consulate service, was serving there, one of the highest-ranking African-Americans in our foreign service. His son interned there that summer, went to be like his dad. They died there. They died there, but he was at his duty station. And, you know, it's been over almost 15 years, and then, oh, yeah. Well, it's not an oh, yeah. These men and women are serving the United States of America. They were at their duty station. They were trying to help Libya rise up now to be able to create a government and be able to create opportunity for its own people, and they gave their lives. Ambassador Chris Stevens had already served 2 tours in Libya, but wanted to go back again at this new moment in history to stand up, to help Libya stand up, a true government that was free and would give their people a chance at democracy and participating in really a new Middle East. And then there was Sean Smith, who was a 10-year veteran of Foreign Service. He was an information management officer. He had served in Iraq. He's a father of 2 children, a devoted husband. Well, we now know what happened to them. So we must continue our strong partnership with Libya after the fall of Gaddafi. But I call upon the new leadership. Call for calm. Call for tolerance. Call for, if you're angry, there are ways to do protest and so on. You don't have to go around killing the American ambassador when our air people, our Air Force, flew over Libya, and our President and our Congress worked to support this new government coming up. And then there's Cairo, because of anger over a video. And I don't know about this video. I don't know its content, but I do know the outcome, that our embassy in Cairo was stormed. They tore down our American flag. They replaced it with another flag. But we are the flag of the United States of America. And our flag is in Egypt. Our flag is in Egypt because we are great allies to the Egyptian government and great supporters of the Egyptian people as they come through the Arab Spring and again trying to create a new day and a new way. I say to Ambassador Patterson and the entire staff, again, our thoughts and prayers are with you. I was in Cairo. I know what they do every day. I know how during the Arab Spring, many of them were locked in the embassy trying to keep our government functioning while their own families had to be evacuated. Some didn't see their families for 3 weeks because they were inside the embassy. They couldn't leave, and we had the most massive evacuation of civilian employees in our history since really the beginning of some other armed conflicts. So I say to those embassy staff, both our wonderful Ambassador Ann Patterson, but to a lot of the little people who work at the embassy, the people who keep the commercial commerce office open, the people who are doing the wonderful work with NGOs to show them how to work to build a free and new kind of society, and also to the foreign nationals who work in our embassy. So we think about you. And I say to the leadership in both countries again, call for calm, call for tolerance. But I say to my colleagues here, we've got to call for calm and tolerance right in this institution. We've got to really support our men and women in the State Department, our men and women in the military, all who serve overseas are representatives of the United States of America. Whether you are the Peace Corps or the Marine Corps, whether you are the Foreign Service or the Commercial Service or whatever, you're in the service of the United States of America, promoting our values, trying to help promote democracy, and also trying to have economic and strategic cooperation. I thank our Foreign Service staff. Many of them live in Maryland, but that's not the point. They live in the United States of America. And so I say to all, when you point your finger and say, we really don't need a government, I think we do need a government. And when we talk about standing up for our military, now in these tough budget times, absolutely we should. But remember, there are others overseas who also carry our flag in very dangerous areas. So let's start respecting the people who work for our government. Let's make sure they have the right resources to do their job. And then let our President, our talented Secretary of State, help work with the others to work with other world leaders to do something to really bring about stability. So, Madam President, I feel very strongly about this. I guess what you're hearing from Senator Mikulski is grief for what's happened in Libya, worry about what's happened in Cairo, tension about what continues to happen in the Middle East, and then frustration about what goes on here. When after all is said and done, more gets said than gets done, and what is said is often not very good. The world is watching us here. We're supposed to be the greatest democracy in the world. And not only are we supposed to be, I believe that we are. But democracy begins with us. Democracy is not only something written on a piece of paper, which are our founding documents, but we have to live what is in those founding documents. We have to, first of all, start with civility, start with respect, start with conversations among ourselves about how we can truly work together to help our country and to help our country help the world.
Senator Chuck Grassley, Republican of Iowa, on many committees in Congress, including the Agriculture Committee, Budget, Judiciary, Joint Taxation. a wide range of issues you're involved in. Thanks so much for being here, Senator.
Of course, I'm glad to be with you, and C-SPAN is kind of like a town meeting, nationwide town meeting, and I love town meetings in my state of Iowa.
Well, we'll talk more about that as the show goes on this morning. One thing that you've been doing is hearing from constituents about the Farm Bill, the legislation that's pending in Congress. What are you hearing from people back home about their concerns about the Farm Bill being stalled out in Congress right now?
Not much about the details within the bill, because I think both city and rural people are pretty much satisfied with what the House of Representatives, the Senate passed. Basically, they're wondering when it's going to pass, because they know that it's an odd situation with farm legislation. Every farm bill since 1950s has been an amendment to the 1949 Farm Bill. So when the 2008 Farm Bill sunsets September 30th, you go back to 1949. Well, of course, the situation in agriculture is a lot different now in 21st century than it was in 1950. So if you don't get something on the books, it's kind of bad policy, 49 policy. So they're really asking for one of two things. The ideal thing would be to get a 5-year farm bill passed. And remember, the 5-year farm bill also includes a 5-year extension of the food stamp program. And 80% of the farm bill is food stamps, not benefit for the Department of Agriculture or the farmers or conservation, things like that. Or if you can't get a 5-year farm bill passed, because that's the ideal, then at least a 1-year extension of the existing farm bill. And that's not unusual, because I think in 2007 we had a sunset and it was extended for 1 year until we got the 2008 farm bill passed.
Would you be okay with a 1-year extension? Is that enough?
It's not ideal, but it keeps us from going back to something that was not going to work today, 1949, and that's the second best, but not really the best.
How important is drought relief right now to your constituents? And describe what you've seen on the ground back in Iowa.
Okay. Well, we have a drought not only in Iowa, but in 2/3 of the state, I believe. And in Iowa, some places it's very, very bad. But, you know, farmers that were lucky enough to get a couple of inches of rain during July might be harvesting 170 bushel of corn per acre. And then someplace else where maybe the soil is sandy and more subject to drought, they might be getting 10 bushel of corn to the acre. So it's very widespread. But we do know this, that we're going to probably have maybe the 4th or 5th best corn crop nationwide we've ever had, but it's still down tremendously from last year. Last year it averaged about 180 bushel to the acre. They expect the state of Iowa to have about 132 bushel per acre, and I think nationwide about 120 bushel per acre. And now that sounds like a lot, because when I started farming in 1960, you know, the average nationwide was about 60 bushel per acre.
We're talking with Senator Grassley of Iowa. If you'd like to join the conversation, Democrats can call 202-737-0001, Republicans 202-737-0002, and independent callers 202-628-0205. Senator, you don't serve on the Foreign Relations Committee, but we would like to hear your perspective on this news. We're finding out this morning that the U.S. ambassador to Libya was killed in a rocket attack. This is just breaking news. But what are the implications of this on our relationship overseas with Libya, also with Egypt?
It ought to have very serious implications, because no country, it doesn't matter whether it's the United States or any other country, when you have an embassy in a foreign country, it's just like American soil in that country. It ought to be respected. It ought to be protected. We do the same thing here in Washington, D.C., consulates around the United States. We make sure that they're adequately protected. And particularly when you get a rocket attack like that, it's an act of war, and it ought to be treated like an act of war. Now, I don't, you know, I don't have the details yet, but if we had an embassy personnel murdered, obviously that's a sad situation, and you have to express the sort of regret for the families that are involved. But the most important thing is we have to show the world that we're a nation that lives by international law. We expect other countries to live by international law, and this is a violation of international law, and you have to take appropriate action.
Here's a statement from Secretary Clinton on the death of the personnel, Ambassador Chris Stevens, but also 3 others. It says, with profound sadness, I share the news of the death of 4 American personnel in Benghazi, Libya yesterday. Among them were U.S. Ambassador Chris Stevens and Foreign Service Information Management Officer Sean Smith. We're still making next of kin notifications for the 2 others. Our hearts go out to all the families and colleagues. And the statement goes on from there to share more information about those lost. Secretary Clinton says all the Americans we lost in yesterday's attacks made the ultimate sacrifice. We condemn this vicious and violent attack that took their lives, which they had committed to helping the Libyan people reach for a better future.
Yeah. And, you know, 4 years ago, the president made a very gracious effort going around that part of the world, giving speeches, showing that the expression of friendship of our people towards that part of the world. And I suppose, you know, now it looks like that was maybe a mistake because it probably showed some weakness on our part.
Let's go to the phones and hear what our callers have to say. Harry's a Republican in Dexter Island, Iowa. Good morning, Harry.
Good morning, Libby, and good morning, Senator Grassley. It's thank you for C-SPAN, and I want to thank Chuck for his service for many years, you know, and also being one of the only farmers. And what Van and him and Barbara keep their farm in Iowa and come back to Iowa and visit all 99 counties every year. Most people don't know about Chuck, but his middle name is Ernst, and he earnestly works hard for the people of Iowa, and he's deeply esteemed by all of us in Iowa as our senior senator. Senator, this year on the Farm Bill, with the drought and the lower yields, we thank God for the higher prices that will help us out. But will there be a cap on the, you know, with farmers like me with 5,000 acres? Will we be able to get the full benefit of our lower yields in hail and federal crop insurance? And will you work with, you know, I was a little bit upset with Mrs. Vilsack when she ran against Steve King. You know, she still thinks the price of the combine is $100,000. Well, you know, my combine is with 2 heads now $750,000, and you know, to try to get 5,000 acres of corn and soybeans out every year, I trade combines every 2 or 3 years, and she needs to realize that, you know, if there's caps on how much we can get back from our crop insurance, I can't replace, and then that hurts the economy if I can't keep updating my equipment and keep feeding America. But
Harry, let's get a response from the senator.
Yeah. There would be a, in the Senate, well, first of all, the House bill is not passed the House. It's out of committee, and the committee bill in the House does not have these limits that we have in the Senate bill. There'd be $1 million limit on subsidy for, in other words, if you had $1 million of income, the limit on subsidy for crop insurance, and other places in the Farm Bill, there'd be a $50,000 limit on Title I commodity programs.
Our caller mentioned a House race that's in Iowa. Representative Steve King, a Republican, going against Christy Vilsack, a Democrat. People know that last name nationwide because she's married to the Agriculture Secretary. Weigh in on the race for us.
Well, it's one of the most, there's 2 very competitive races in Iowa. One, Latham against Boswell. That's incumbents against each other. And then because Christy Vilsack is well known as First Lady of Iowa for 8 years and now the Secretary of Agriculture, and the ability to get a lot of money, there's an indication that there could be $3 million spent on each side of that. I think at this point very much King is favored, but it's the most competitive race he's ever had, but I think he will win.
Are you doing campaigning on his behalf?
Yes,
as a
I am.
Republican?
Yeah, and I'm campaigning for the candidate. I'm not campaigning against anybody else. Wherever I go, in a legislative race or a congressional race, I campaign for the Republican candidate. I don't badmouth the Democratic candidate.
Senator Chuck Grassley of Iowa. Let's hear from Kathleen, a Democrat in Chicago. Good morning, Kathleen.
Good morning, and please let me express myself for a second. Sure. Senator Grassley, I just heard you make a statement about President Obama with this Libya stuff. It's not his fault. It's that minister down there in Florida. that wanted to burn the Quran, he also made a film, and that film got across the water for somehow. And that's what started this fight. You all need to stop blaming President Obama for trying to keep the peace in this country. All you all want to do is just fight, fight, fight. You want to continuously put our men and women in harm's way. And then when our men and women come back, you all don't even want to help them out like you should. You know, you need to stop that mess. Stop blaming the president. Go get that preacher. That's who started this mess last night. And as far as that farm bill, if the president was to bring it up today, and I heard you say earlier that you need a 5-year passing of the bill, if President Obama was to bring that up today and ask you guys from your track record, you all would say no after sitting here saying that you need to get it passed. So, you know, you all need to get together. We are paying you all salary, and you all have done nothing. And I'm not trying to be hard or hateful, but the truth is the light. You all need to quit stifling this country just because you want to get rid of one person. That is not fair to the taxpayers.
Kathleen will get a response from the senator, but before I want to just give some context to the first part of what she was saying. I'm reading here from a story on the NPR website by the Associated Press. It gives some context. The protests in Libya and Egypt were sparked by outrage over a film ridiculing the Prophet Muhammad, produced by an Israeli filmmaker living in California and being promoted by an extreme anti-Muslim Egyptian Christian campaigner in the United States. Excerpts from the film, dubbed into Arabic, were posted on YouTube.
Libya, you heard Kathleen misinterpret what I said to you, because I was complimenting the president when he first was elected to office. He went around this part of the world trying to smooth things out for the United States. And all I said was it may look like a kind of a cynical approach now, that it didn't do the good that it was meant to do, but it was well-intentioned. In regard to the Farm Bill, it happens. Kathleen also needs to read more in the newspapers about the Farm Bill, because the Farm Bill is that passed the Senate. And as far as I know, even what came out of the House Agriculture Committee is something that the president would be very willing to sign, because Secretary Vilsack has been getting on the House Representatives to get the bill passed.
Let's hear from Mark, an independent caller, New Era, Michigan. Good morning, Mark. Mark, are you with us? Last call for Mark in Michigan.
Yes, ma'am. The play is, I'm looking at playing the fire brigade as far as the drought in out west. And we had, at the same time, we had a fire down in Texas, and we had the oil companies arguing they needed their tax break. How much of a big deal would it be for them to donate 80,000 gallons worth of diesel fuel cards and play the fire brigade to siphon water out of the Mississippi River and take it down to the fire down in Texas, or take it out to where the drought is? How hard would it be to get that through Congress?
You don't have to get anything through Congress to fight the fires. They're doing it. The Fire Service of the U.S. Department of Agriculture, the Forest Service, is doing a very good job. They've got the resources they need. So this is a very impractical suggestion that the caller from Michigan has.
Let's move on to Sandra, Republican, Birmingham, Alabama. Hi, Sandra.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I just have 2 or 3 points I'd like to say, please. Number one, I would ask the senator and every senator to go to a place called powerwatch.org, and you can understand what's going on in the Middle East behind all this, and hearing their own words that hadn't been filtered for the United States, what they're being taught, and that would explain why they're doing this uprising. Because these kinds of things will escalate. Our people will be getting killed more if our government keeps apologizing to another country for what we can say in this country. And we are a free country. And the Bibles and Jesus have been desecrated. I mean, it's just been horrible. Yet no one can say anything about a Quran, and we're in war with these people. That's just giving the wrong signal. And one other little thing, our president, who has a white mother and a black father, he's a mixed person, was elected, and everyone hoped that he would really bring this country together. but it's totally dividing. I mean, he has put racism in it himself. And I am you still could work good. I mean, I was had a good paying job. I've been disabled. I've raising 2 children on with food stamps and things, but I would gladly give all that up to get our country back and just have a little...
But Sandra, what does that have to do with the president's race?
Because I've heard so much of people the president himself trying to divide our country on race. That's all you hear out here.
Let's get a response from Senator Grassley.
Well, I don't think he's trying to divide it on race. I think if there's any accusation of division, it's between economic groups, middle class versus people that are higher, but I do find fault with the president for that sort of class warfare. Because the president needs to bring people together. But I can't accuse the president, and I think it's wrong to accuse the president of dividing America along racial lines.
Rate the level of tension right now in the country for us. You're in your 6th term in the Senate. As we head into this political campaign, Iowa's a battleground state. We can talk more about that this morning. But what is your take on the level of tension or strife in the country right now?
Well, I think that one thing is that unlike 20 years ago when 3 or 4 networks controlled 80% of all the news that went out, you have all the talk radio, you have all the FM stations, you have all the cable stations you have opportunities for massive discussion of things. Anybody that's got a political view now, particularly with the internet, anybody that's got a political view, you can get your political view out. So I think it's tended to strengthen our democracy from the standpoint of more participation, having more potential. So I like that part of it. The fact that there's a dissension, there is a lack of civility generally in our society that's grown over the last 20 years that expressed through politics. I don't think you can blame politics for the people being less civil than they used to be. So that's a reflection within politics. But I think also you see it overplayed because, you know, controversy makes news. You know, wherever you go, whether it's Fox News or whether it's MSNBC, probably C-SPAN's the only place where you don't get this sort of thing. You know, controversy makes news. If you're going to sell news, if you're going to get advertisement, you got to make your show interesting. And so I always tell the people back home in my state of Iowa, there is too much partisanship in Congress. But there's not quite as much partisanship as what you see because controversy makes news. I tell them about how working 10 years with Senator Baucus on the Finance Committee. He and I worked closely together, and over a period of 10 years, there was probably only 2 or 3 bills, and the only one I remember is the health care reform bill that you can remember of significance, that every other bill got a committee with bipartisan support. But you never hear about Chuck Grassley and Baucus, one Republican, one Democrat, working together because we were working together. If we were fighting every day, it would have been all over the country. See, so you got to look at some of the motivation behind the people that are putting the news out, but there still is too much partisanship. And the other thing is, now this is a criticism for Kathleen that thought I was criticizing the president too much. I am criticizing the president on this. He was going to be the most post-partisan president ever. And it seems to me with his class warfare, he's tended to divide America and hasn't been the post-partisan president that he wanted to be.
Chuck Grassley, Senator, Republican of Iowa. He serves on the Agriculture Committee, also Budget, Finance, Judiciary, on which he is the ranking member. One issue that you've been working on Judiciary is the Fast and Furious investigation. Yeah. You were the one who initially revealed the gun-walking aspect of that operation. We were expecting to see a House hearing related to Operation Fast and Furious. It was postponed until next week, and we're watching to see this report from the Justice Department Inspector General come out soon. What do you hope to hear from that?
Well, first of all, I hope that the Inspector General is going to do what Inspector Generals are supposed to do. They're supposed to not be under any political pressure from the people at the head of the department. They're supposed to be independent, doing an independent investigation, get the truth out. And what I want is the truth. Now, I won't know until it gets out. But Mr. Horowitz came to my office when he was first appointed and assured me that he was going to be that independent person. Now, when we review the report, I'll find out whether he kept his word. But what I hope is we find out who at the highest level of the Justice Department approved fast and furious gun walking that led to the murder of Brian Terry, the Border Patrol agent, and didn't do anything to arrest drug kingpins in Mexico. Bottom line is find out who it is and get that person fired, because a stupid program where the federal government down in Arizona goes to licensed gun dealers and say, you know, we want you to violate the law. We want you to sell guns illegally to straw people, and we'll follow these guns across the border. The problem is they didn't follow them across the border, and 2,000 guns got out, and 2 of these guns were found at the murder of Brian Terry. Now, there's some evidence that we finally got the murderer of Brian Terry last week down in Mexico. But just think, this thing's been going on for 3 years. The most important thing is we're being stonewalled in our constitutional responsibility oversight. You know, we don't only pass laws and appropriate money. We're supposed to be a check on the executive branch to make sure that the laws are faithfully executed. And obviously, our gun laws aren't being faithfully executed if the government's promoting the illegal sale of guns. And so we've been stonewalled on getting this information from the Justice Department. And I hope the Inspector General, in his report next week, gets this out.
The Attorney General testified before your Judiciary Committee earlier this summer, back in June. That was the last time we saw him appear before the Judiciary Committee. Some of your colleagues called for him to resign and said that he should step down. Did that go too far?
I have not asked for his resignation. I would ask for his resignation if I get proof that he's the one that approved this stupid program. But right now, I don't have that proof, so I'm not going to ask for it. I'm not going to find fault with my colleagues that did ask for it.
Let's go on and hear from Gregory, a Democratic caller in New York City, New York. You're on with Senator Grassley.
Yes, good morning.
Good morning.
I have to proceed my comment with, I am Native American and a descendant of Aaron McMaster's, a slave to the McMasters in North Carolina. Mr. Grassley, listening to you speak, you sound like a politician that's on the verge of losing office. You've been in office for 36 years. You've been on the government
32
payroll.
years.
Well, 32 years. That's a long time, sir.
Yeah.
I want to make 3 quick points, Libby, before you push the dial tone on me. When you first started to talk about the ambassador that was killed yesterday, you didn't mention the cause of the film that was created and who created the film and what was the intention behind the film. It was an American-Israeli that did an anti-Muslim film that, you know, cause and effect. That's what happened. Number 2, Mr. Grassley, you did degrade the president when you described his actions when he went to speak to the Middle East to mend the fences between us and that part of the world. Thirdly, you want to talk about class division, Mr. Grassley? I think all one has to do is look at the recent Democratic National Convention and look at the audience, and then look at the Republican convention and look at that audience. And you tell me where the divide is.
Well, I'm not going to add to division within America, because that's what we all ought to be fighting against. We're all Americans. We shouldn't be hyphenated Americans. You can be proud of your heritage and everything, but in America, we're all Americans. And so I'm not going to answer that and respond to that. Otherwise, the only thing I could sense in what he was saying is there was an anti-Israeli, anti-Jewish statement in his first comment, and I think he should not be dividing. I think in America, I think he was finding fault with the film that was being produced. What does he think the First Amendment is? Freedom of speech. About the only thing is you can't yell fire in a theater. You know, that goes back to a Supreme Court decision 100 years ago. We have free speech, and it's a First Amendment right, it's a constitutional amendment, and we ought to do it. I don't think Americans should suffer around the world because we have free speech in this country. I mean, after all, the United Nations is supposed to protect those things as well.
Senator Chuck Grassley in his 6th term. He also has served in the U.S. House, the Iowa legislature, and is a farmer.
Yes.
Let's go to hear from William, an independent caller in Virginia. Good morning, William.
Good morning. Mr. Grassley, I would have to say that I think the Republicans are back up to their old tricks about this election thing, because my memory serves me well, and I thoroughly believe that back when Reagan and Carter was running back against each other, that they orchestrated the helicopter, the Republicans orchestrated the helicopter attack over there, or the wreckage, you know, that caused him the re-election, Carter. Now, I think that Netanyahu and Mitt Romney got together, and I think they plotted this whole thing out here for it to land on the 11th here today in the Middle East, and you've got the money to do it, and you're all a bunch of crooks. I hope the Justice Department takes you all and puts you where you belong.
William, who do you mean by all? You mean everyone in Congress?
You're right. Everybody on the Republican side up there.
All Republicans.
Well,
okay.
Now, that's the sort of post-partisanship I hope that the president was going to do away with. Did I hear him right? Was he blaming people in the United States for the attack of 9/11?
I can't confirm that, but it sounded like he might.
Yeah. Well, that's a conspiracy. I had a person come to one of my town meetings in Iowa with great big charts. I'll bet they were taller than he was, with pictures of photographs of the people going into it, and telling me, can't you look at the smoke that's coming out of there? That's not diesel fuel. There's a conspiracy in this country to make that happen. Well, you know, we've had all sorts of investigations, and we can't spend our time listening to foolish things like that.
Let's go on and hear from Juan, a Republican in Tampa, Florida. Hi, Juan.
Hey, hello.
Good morning.
Thank you, Senator Charles. I'm calling from Florida. You guys are doing a good job, but the president, you know,